What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network for the top 10 decks in the Pokemon trading card game in December 2022. Before we get into the top 10 decks, shout out to my lovely sponsors. You can find coupon codes and affiliate links in the description down below. And also remember to subscribe to my channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. Asterisk, the daily part of that may be intermittent during the holiday season, but sometime in January, we should be getting back to a regular schedule. So in today's video, I'm ranking the top 10 decks in standard format for how popular and how successful I expect them to be at major events like the upcoming Arlington Regional Championships and the San Diego Regional Championships. If you're interested in finding out how to play in Pokemon events, you can find IRL major events at Pokemon.com, and you can find online events to play in at play.limitlesstcg.com. Number one, to no surprise, is going to be Lugia V Star Archeops. Lugia V Star is just an incredibly powerful card combined with Archeops, which it cheats into play, and Archeops is a very powerful card as well that allows Lugia V Star to reach its full potential and also play a plethora of tech attackers in most lists, like Radiant Charizard, Amazing Rare Eviltal, Stoutland V, even using Luminion V as an attacker. This list from Isaiah Bradner recently at top 8 of Toronto Regionals played a 1-1 line of Espeon Vmax because Espeon Vmax's ability protects your Pokemon which have energy attached to them from effects from your opponent's attacks. Number 2 is going to be Mew Vmax Genesect. It's almost as inherently powerful as Lugia V Star. It's around the same level of consistency and reliabilities, and there's two different versions of Mew Vmax that we'll look at here. The first one is Mew Vmax with Meloetta and Fusion Strike energy for the Melodious Echo attack to do 70 damage for each Fusion Strike energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So thanks to Alessa Sparkle, Meloetta being a basic Pokemon, and additional damage modifiers like Power Tablet and Choice Belt, you can do a whole lot of damage on your first turn if you go second and you can play supporters and attack, which makes this version of the deck something that people want to play because you can get those really early and aggressive knockouts, which sometimes will just swing the game so heavily in your favor that you win from that spot. The other version is going to be DTE Mew Vmax, which plays 0 Meloetta and 0 Fusion Strike energy, focusing just on using your Mew Vmax as your main attacker. And this leaves you with extra room in the deck to play things like Path to the Peak, Lost City, Heroes Medal, and Cross Switcher. Number 3 is going to be Lost Zone Greninja decks. So that is Lost Zone decks using Radiant Greninja as their choice of Radiant Pokemon. This is the recent 3rd and 7th place list from Caleb Gittimer and Grant Manley from the Toronto Regionals. So the Lost Zone decks will use Comfy for the flower selecting as their main way of drawing cards and getting cards into the Lost Zone, in addition to Colress's Experiment to draw cards and to get cards into the Lost Zone. As you get more cards into the Lost Zone, you unlock more capabilities of your deck. At 4 cards in the Lost Zone, Cramorant can attack for free. At 7 cards in the Lost Zone, you can use Mirage Gate, and at 10 cards in the Lost Zone, you can use Sableye's Lost Mine attack. In the end game, you'll want to empty your deck to 0 cards, and doing that just by drawing a lot of cards with Comfy, Colress's Experiment, etc. And then Energy Recycler 5 basic energies into the deck, and then use Kyogre's Aqua Storm to discard the top 5 cards of your deck, which will be guaranteed to be energy cards. You'll get the maximum damage from that and win the game. Number 4 is Palkia V Star Intelion, and we're going to be specifically looking at Jake Gearhart's list here from Toronto Regionals, which essentially revitalized this archetype because the community was pretty doubtful of Palkia Intelion in a Lugia world, but the Articuno with Wild Freeze in combination with Emergency Jelly proved good enough to combat a field of Lugia V Star. I do think this list will probably change a little bit now that Lugia V Star is fully cognizant of the capabilities of Paralyze with the Articuno plus Emergency Jelly. So we may see some changes, maybe a Temple of Sinnoh or two, to even further disrupt Lugia V Star decks. Number 5 is Arceus V Star Duraludon, and this is kind of a countery deck because Duraludon VMAX has the Skyscraper ability that says that it can't be damaged by attacks from Pokemon that have special energy on them. So, namely, Lugia decks will struggle against this, but they do have amazing rare Eviltal that can just take an instant knockout, which is known as an effect and not damage. So, Duraludon does not block that. However, Big Parasol blocks that, and that's why the deck plays 2 Big Parasol in the current meta. Number 6 is going to be Control. This can be with Mewtwo V Union or without, as we've seen in the past few major events. But the most recent one that we'll be looking at here is the first place list from Piper Lapine at Toronto Regionals with the Mewtwo V Union Control. If this deck looks complicated and you don't know how it wins, it's probably because it is complicated, and it takes a really experienced player and a really confident player to play these kinds of decks and do well with them. The only 2 players I know of that played this deck at Toronto were Piper Lapine and Finnegan Lynch, who are both fantastic players, and it makes sense that those would be the only 2 people I knew that played this deck because it's really hard to play. But Mewtwo V Union is 310 HP. It can heal itself for 200 damage at a time. It can also spread 16 damage counters, and it has an attack that does 300 damage. So you can just sit in the active and heal yourself infinitely. If you go back and watch the finals match from Toronto, you'll see that's exactly what Piper Lapine did against the Duraludon matchup. She used Super Regeneration to heal 200 every turn, and every few turns would use Pokemon Center Lady to heal 60 damage to fix that extra little bit of damage that she wasn't healing each turn with the Super Regeneration. The weakness of Mewtwo V Union, though, is Drapion V, which is also a collateral Mew Vmax tech, so I do think Mew Vmax and Mewtwo V Union will be pretty teched against this upcoming weekend in Arlington for the regional championships, just because Mewtwo V Union 1, Mew Vmax is already a known popular threat, so Drapion V makes sense to toss into a lot of decks this week, which may even mean that Drapion V might not be that valuable if less people are playing decks like Mewtwo V Union and Mew Vmax. Number 7 is Regigigas. Regigigas had a few tournaments where it was so good, and then it fell off a little bit recently at Toronto Regionals and at LAIC. So will Arlington or San Diego be the return of the power of the Regigigas deck? Regigigas' Ancient Wisdom allows you to accelerate 3 energy cards of any kind from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon as long as you have all of the Regis on your board. And this creates a nice little toolbox deck where you can hit all kinds of weaknesses and one-shot a lot of Pokemon. So even though Regigigas does not hit for weakness on anything, Gigaton Break does 300 damage to a VMAX Pokemon. With a Choice Belt, it does 330, so that'll clear most VMAX Pokemon off the board. Number 8 is Lost Zone with Radiant Charizard as the Radiant Pokemon of choice, and these decks will look drastically different than the Lost Zone Greninja decks. These will not be featuring a whole bunch of tech attackers. They also will be much lower on energy cards, and they aren't using Mirage Gate typically. This list was piloted by Pedro Torres, a fantastic player. He got top 64 at the Sao Paulo Internationals. This list is using some Temple of Sinnoh as a little bit of extra to combat the Lugia V Star decks that everybody knew would be popular at this event. And Radiant Charizard is a super strong attacker that can do 280 damage for just 1 energy and a Choice Belt. So you want to try to reuse that Radiant Charizard as much as possible. But you also have the Sableye with Lost Mine to reuse and abuse as much as possible. So you really want to turbo into 10 cards into the Lost Zone so you can start using Lost Mine. And then once your opponent has taken enough prize cards to trigger your Excited Heart ability on Charizard to make Combustion Blast a more usable attack, you start trying to just chain those Charizards back-to-back turns with the help of Clara. Number 9 is going to be Vikavolt V Variants, so this could be Vikavolt V with Regigigas Vmax, with Intelion line, or the First Plate Stuckert list with Palkia V Star. This is kind of a Turbo Palkia or Turbo Vikavolt list, with the other one tossed in there. Since they'll both already be using Melony and Water Energy, we just throw in the Lightnings to make Vikavolt V and Raikou V usable. So this, I actually have gameplay of this deck on the channel that you can check out, and I quite enjoyed this deck because Vikavolt V can take care of your early turns with some poke damage and item lock, and then when you need to, you can come in with a Raikou V or a Palkia V Star that's swinging for some much larger damage than Vikavolt V does, and hopefully the item lock plus the bursts of damage will be able to take down your opponent. And lastly, we have Articuno Wild Freeze variants. We'll look at two lists for this. The first being the first place list from Brisbane Regionals, played by Tim Franklin. This is the Frostmoth Alolan Vulpix V-Star Articuno deck. We have gameplay of that on the channel here if you'd like to check that out, and a little bit more of an in-depth look at the deck. But this is definitely a counter meta deck that wanted to beat Lugia V Stars with the Articuno plus Emergency Jelly. Alolan Vulpix V Star has an attack that blocks damage from Pokemon with abilities, so that's another good counter strategy part of the deck. Drapion V for Mew Vmax or Mewtwo V Union, and then also the Ice Cube that can just completely win against Regigigas, since Blockface says that it can't be damaged by attacks from basic Pokemon. The last list we'll look at here is the second Articuno Wild Freeze variant, and this one comes from Charlie Lockyer from Top 8 at Toronto Regionals recently. This one is not going to be using Frostmoth, but it is going to really be focusing down on that Wild Freeze plus Emergency Jelly tactic with the help of Radiant Alakazam to move damage from the opponent's Pokemon to other Pokemon, so you can get the most out of all of that damage you're putting on the active and trap the Pokemon in the active with paralysis, while also stopping them from potentially being knocked out by using the ability from Radiant Alakazam to move the damage around and set up other Pokemon for knockouts, maybe even in the same turn thanks to Intelion Quick Shooting, which can also place some damage counters unsuspectingly on your opponent's board. So those are my top 10 decks that I would be considering to play or looking out to play against at upcoming major events. Let me know what you thought about all of these decks in the comments down below. Am I missing your favorite? Is there a deck that should be on here that is going to win the next event? I'd love to hear about it. Subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. Check out my sponsors down below. Join the Discord, which is also linked in the description. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.